What's up, Taiwan? I'm Louise with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Tensions are rising between Manila and Beijing in the South China Sea. The Philippines says Chinese Coast Guard vessels attacked one of its ships, leaving one sailor seriously injured. Rosie Greninger reports.
Waving axes, a swarm of Chinese Coast Guard vessels and personnel surround, attack and board a Philippine Navy ship in the South China Sea. The latest confrontation on Monday comes as tensions over territorial disputes reach a boiling point. Manila says it was conducting a resupply mission when the Chinese Coast Guard rammed their ship, with local media saying a Philippine sailor lost his thumb in the clash. But China is shifting blame, saying the Philippine ship entered territory they claim in the disputed waters.
中国海警的现场采取的执法措施是专业克制的，旨在拦阻非方的船只非法运补，没有对非方的人员直接采取措施。
The newly released footage of the incident that occurred days ago contradicts Beijing's claims. While Manila responded in a statement, saying the Chinese Coast Guard's continued aggressive behaviour and unprofessional conduct towards a legitimate humanitarian mission is unacceptable. China and the Philippines have both claimed territory in the South China Sea for decades. Beijing claims the whole resource-rich sea line that sees a third of all global trade pass through, while part of that area Manila also calls its own. Beijing says it will continue to safeguard this disputed area, accusing Manila of smuggling construction materials and weapons to occupy the contested Second Thomas Shoal. Meanwhile, the US condemns China's actions.
This kind of behavior is provocative, it's reckless, it's unnecessary, and it could lead to misunderstandings and miscalculations that could lead to something much bigger and much more violent.
And this confrontation is not an isolated case. It follows a growing number of clashes between the two countries in recent months, including Chinese ships firing water cannons at Philippine vessels in April. China recently issued new maritime rules, allowing its Coast Guard to detain foreigners trespassing in the contested waters for up to 2 months, though neighbouring countries are questioning its international legitimacy. While the Philippines has submitted a legal filing to the United Nations to expand its maritime entitlement in parts of the sea. But Article 5 of a US-Philippine defence treaty means they're compelled to defend each other in the case of an armed attack. And some analysts are questioning how and at what point the US might react to these incidents in the South China Sea.
I think it's a bit too early to tell. And there's just, remember, the Mutual Defense Treaty, Article 5 is just one of many articles. There's a lot of ways they could respond to this.
But if these attacks continue, it could trigger the US to get involved, adding to fears that another incident like this could spark a regional war. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
North Korea says Pyongyang and Moscow have agreed to give immediate military assistance to one another if either is attacked. The deal was reached during Russian President Vladimir Putin's trip to North Korea. Both Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un have described it as a major upgrade in their relations. Putin is now in Vietnam and has praised that country for its stance on the war in Ukraine. Vietnam has a neutral foreign policy and has not condemned Russia's invasion. Taiwan is set to purchase around 1,000 suicide drones from the United States. The new weapons are part of the military's push to create an advanced and modern fighting force. Jaime Ocon reports.
Drones like these are quickly making their way into Taiwan's armed forces. It's part of a push by Taiwan to upgrade its military equipment as it faces ongoing threats of invasion from China. That's why on Wednesday, the U.S. approved a sale of almost 1,000 suicide drones. These are lightweight, unmanned aerial systems which explode on impact. Taiwan's defense ministry thanked the U.S. for the sale and for ensuring that these drones are delivered as soon as possible.
这一次已经大幅的缩短行政审查的时间。那么，国防部对于美方安和团队为了加速对台军售的各项努力，要特别表达感谢。
This type of suicide drone, called the Switchblade, can easily fit in a soldier's backpack. Last year, Taiwan unveiled its own version of the drone alongside with other unmanned systems as part of what it calls a drone fleet. The military says this fleet will provide reconnaissance and extra firepower without putting soldiers at risk. And with so many drones being introduced, the goal is for every unit in Taiwan's army to have them at their disposal.
配发到联兵营的针尖排或者是连级单位的话，它不但可以执行这个情报收集、及时打击，还可以让我们的基层单位马上就获得这种从事电子作战。 乃至于反无人机的能力，那这个目前都是我们基层单位非常欠缺。
Taiwan says it plans to procure almost 1,000 domestically made drones in addition to the ones purchased from the U.S. And with the purchase of newer systems from the U.S., Taiwan is also hoping it can use this technology to better develop its own drone manufacturing program.
未来是不是有专利移转在台生产，更联动到台湾国防产业技术的提升，以及自主国防能力的提升？这个方向的发展其实是蛮乐观的。
With production of these machines on the rise, Taiwan is hoping it can continue bolstering its defenses while minimizing the risks to its soldiers on the ground. James Lin and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
The family of a Taiwan fisher detained in China is calling on the government to do more to secure his release. The fisher, surnamed Hu, is from Taiwan's outlying islands of Kinmen. He was rescued by China's Coast Guard in March after drifting into Chinese waters during heavy fog. Hu's family believes that he hasn't been released because of ongoing tensions over the deaths of 2 Chinese fishers in February. They died in Taiwanese waters when their boat overturned while being chased by Taiwan's Coast Guard.
我们家属一直认为这个应该是跟渔船的事情有关系。那我们请政府说，赶快去把渔船这个事情来把它解决，用同理心。你2个渔船的尸体放在这边，同样的那边的家属也是会很着急。
Taiwan has become the world's 5th largest importer of Russian coal. That's according to a report by Taiwan's non-profit Environmental Rights Foundation and a Finnish research organisation, the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air. One of the companies that's importing Russian coal is Formosa Plastics. Protesters have descended on their AGM. Sally Ensign was there as well.
Activists are outside the annual general meeting of Taiwan's biggest petrochemical company, Formosa Plastics, saying it is effectively facilitating Russia's war in Ukraine. Formosa Plastics imports coal from Russia's energy giant Siberian Coal Energy Company, which environmental groups say has close ties to the Russian military. Russian environmentalist Vladimir Slivyak has gone in to confront Formosa's shareholders at the AGM.
And I'm here to demand from Formosa Plastics to stop all kinds of businesses with Russia, to stop buying Russian coal or anything else from Russia. And the reason is very simple, because as long as you pay to Moscow, it will continue war in Ukraine. More and more people will be dead there.
Activists here are also protesting years-long pollution from Formosa's activities in Vietnam.
Formosa Plastic, stop harming! Formosa Plastics, stop harming!
They say that the conglomerate's actions are inconsistent with international efforts to cut economic ties with Russia. And blocs like the EU have already put heavy sanctions on Russian coal, oil and gas, which are its main exports, to suffocate funds that likely go towards the country's invasion of Ukraine that escalated in 2022. These activists say that continuing buying energy from Russia reflects badly on Taiwan and could damage Taiwan's relationship with Western democracies. Patrick Chen and Sally Jensen in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Calls are growing for a national holiday to remember Taiwan's white terror victims. The decades-long campaign of violent repression against dissidents began shortly after the Second World War and ran well into the 1980s. And those who survived have been forever changed. John Van Trieste reports.
Lu Jianxing guides a tour group through the prison where he spent years of his life. Today, it's a human rights museum, a memorial to victims of Taiwan's White Terror era of authoritarian rule. But in Lu's time here, it was just one of many places holding perceived dissidents. Before his arrest in the 1960s, Lu was an idealistic young man. Taiwan had been under strict martial law since just after World War II, and there were no signs of change. But students like him were determined to make Taiwan a better place all the same. They bristled when an American exchange student wrote a newspaper piece calling Taiwanese society selfish and cold. And they responded by forming a community service society to prove how civic-minded Taiwan's people could be. They were tolerated at first. The China Youth Corps, then a paramilitary group with ties to the Kuomintang government, even gave them support. But in time, Lu and his friends got tired of the Youth Corps' control. So they broke away and founded their own unsanctioned group, something historians of the period say was a dangerous move.
解放军的战争跟国军之间的战争，当然是绝对是第一条战线。那当时国共内战期间，还有第二条战线是学生运动。那个学生运动，国民党是节节败退。那所以国民党来到这边，他会汲取教训，就是学生我一定要掌握住。
Lu's group only had a few dozen members, but that was enough to spark paranoia in official circles. A police report from 1969 claims the group was preparing to overthrow the government and had overseas connections. About a month after this report, police fanned out in the dead of night to arrest whichever members they could find.
一个半暝啊，连一群人，10几个壮汉啊，去个人厝里弄门，我已经在困啊。 结果给我叫起来，叫我衫穿穿的，戴上手铐，出来3部吉普车在那里，带上吉普车，就带蓝嘛，往高雄直奔。然后到高雄有一栋民宅，我入去了就看，1楼入去一个规排拢我的同学。
Lu would eventually be sentenced to life in prison for his group's activities. Behind bars, he was regularly tortured. Still, when news of his life sentence came out, the whole cell block cheered, because there were worse fates. One of Lu's comrades was, by order of the president himself, to be executed, a fate he only escaped after developing severe mental illness in prison. In 1975, the story of Lu and his comrades takes a turn. Chiang Kai-shek, who ruled Taiwan during the White Terror and most of martial law, died. Life sentences were commuted, in Lu's case to 15 years. He walked free in February of 1982, and later became well known as a writer under the pen name Lu Yu. A few years after Lu's release, Taiwan began to transform. 43 years of martial law ended in 1987. In time, free multi-party elections began and led to an eventual reckoning with the dark corners of Taiwan's past. Lu is one of at least 20,000 people who were persecuted under the White Terror. Not all survived to tell their story. Now, there's a move to create a national memorial day for these victims on May 19th. It's something former President Tsai Ing-wen said she would ask the government to look into before she left office.
5.19白色恐怖记忆日的倡议，不只是记忆或者是缅怀，也是让我们的下一代铭记威权统治的这段历史，也提醒我们要将民主前辈的奋斗精神继续传承下去。
With the political will to make it happen, Taiwan could soon have a new date in its calendar of memorials to this traumatic period of its past, the scars of which its survivors still carry. Luffy Li and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, this exhibition in Amsterdam is showing the impact of the Nazi occupation during the Second World War in the Netherlands. I'm Louise Watchdog. Take care. We'll see you next time.